Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show Mindful Matters on Radio Al Ansar at 90.4 FM in Durban and 105.6 FM in Pietermaritzburg. A show that promises to provide an hour of inspiration, information and motivation with me, your host, Nazia Iram Osman. The point of the show is to share our stories so we can learn from each other. So please feel free to WhatsApp your questions, queries, feedback, comments, and most importantly, what else you would like to hear about. The WhatsApp number is 060-904-1056. I feel like I should just get that taped and play it every time. So the topic we will speak about today is the issue of Muslim marriages, our rights and implications. Marriage is a union between two people, which in Islam is a very sacred act. It completes half of our faith. However, because we are living in a country where the laws are not Islamic, that is not Sharia based, thus we need to ensure that we are aware of the consequences that follow once we are married. Currently, as the law stands, when one enters an Islamic marriage or a nikah, the couple is not fully recognized as married legally. So to complete the process, the couple will need to legally register the marriage at the Department of Home Affairs. So if you've been to Home Affairs, you understand the challenges with that. The problem that now arises is that they are not fully aware of the options they have when going and getting their marriage legalized at Home Affairs. So to compound matters, the personnel at Home Affairs are none the wiser. So we need to ask the right questions to get the right answers. And to tell us more about this topic is the lovely Ayesha Karim. Ayesha is an attorney that specializes in family law. Welcome, Ayesha, once more to Mindful Matters.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Nazia, thank you so much for having me back here again. So it feels like I was here just the other day.
Yeah, time flies. Yeah.
So Muslim marriages, gosh, this is, like I've mentioned before, this is something that never seems to get tiring. Our community seems to really want to know more about this topic, and I don't blame them.
I think I have to pause you because you said, yes, I speak about this to the point of nausea.
I do. Every time I'm called to speak at an event or any sort of public gathering, the topic that I'm called to speak about is Muslim marriages. And like I said, I don't blame the organizers of these events or the public from wanting to hear about this because it's such a complex area of law and it almost seems ludicrous. The Muslim community is such a large community just here in Durban. It's almost impossible to go anywhere without seeing Muslim people. So, we've rooted in this country for so many years. We have such a strong sense of community and grounding here.
Especially in Durban.
Especially in Durban. Cape Town as well. Cape Town's got a huge Muslim community. And then it just follows on to say it is shocking that our marriages are still not recognized.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, there's these complexities, and we'll talk about that in a bit more. I know you have lots of questions, I know.
I prepped her. I sent her the questions.
She's been very thorough about this one. So I know you have lots of questions, but yes, the reason I enjoy still speaking about it is because you can't get tired of a particular area of law when it's constantly growing and changing, and so much change is still needed.
Right.
And it's an area of law that's still in the stages of development.
So you're making history, right? You can make that movement happen.
Inshallah, we will try to make history. But yeah, it's not up to me as the attorney. It's up to my clients to come forward.
Right.
And we can, like I said, we can talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yeah. So I've heard you spoke about this at a few events or when the organizers call you. Yes. I don't know if you're comfortable in saying where else did you speak about this? Well, just to understand the platforms that that are interested.
Well, at just last week I did a fundraising event with Islamic Relief, and the topic that we chose to talk about was Muslim marriages and their recognition. And the ladies that attended the event were so interested in this topic and wanted to know more, and you'd be surprised how much they already knew. So women are taking the initiative, they are getting to know about this, and they are so keen and almost desperate to know more. What are my rights? How do I protect myself? What exactly is happening with the law right now? Because we read all sorts of stuff on media, social media, on the news as well, and it becomes a bit murky. We don't really know who and what it is, but yeah, that's where I've been speaking about it.
And I think it's interesting what you said. You said women come and ask you these questions, and I think we were just discussing this outside. And I'm not going to mention who told me that this show is for women. You know who you are. And the topic today, when I said, look, this is what I'm doing, and this man said,
no names mentioned.
Yeah, no names mentioned. He lives in my house. I married him, just saying. So he said that, no, that's a topic for ladies. So it's very interesting that men are not seeing this as affecting them. And I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, yeah, men think it doesn't. Well, that's going to be a very sad awakening, I'm going to predict, in the years to come. And more so than that, like you and I had discussed, if we go and register our marriages, if you register it, if you go down to Home Affairs, like you mentioned, and you choose to register your marriage, those marriages are automatically in community or property. Now, if there is any man out there who thinks that's not going to affect him, then that's...
Well, it depends how much he has now.
Well, let me explain. So first of all, for our viewers that are listening, let me first explain the different types of marriage. I think that's a nice place to start.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
The marriage contracts that you do get.
Right. So we have marriages in community of property, and then we have marriages out of community of property, what is more commonly known as an antenuptial contract. Now, antenuptial contracts, we have two types. We have an ANC with an accrual and an ANC without an accrual. So essentially, there's three types of marriages, that marriage systems that you can choose to register as. Now, when I say you automatically, so you go down to Home Affairs and you say, please register my marriage, and a lot of people, men included, are not aware that those marriages are in community of property. They're presuming they're going to go down to Home Affairs and someone's going to inform them of their
so
rights.
as we said, the personnel themselves don't, or sometimes don't inform you.
And look at the volume of people that are going down there. Do they really have the time to sit and explain to you your rights? They're not.
And after waiting 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours in the line, I don't think your mind is working. You want to get out of there.
Sure, you yourself don't even have the capacity to hear about it. So if you choose to have a marriage out of community of property, so that's with an antenuptial contract, that's going to have to be drawn up by an attorney. Right, so you're going to have to consult with an attorney. This is going to happen prior to entering into the marriage contract. It can be done afterwards, but that's very costly and a bit more complicated. The ideal situation is to have your ANC registered prior to entering into the marriage.
Okay, so what you're saying is register yourself first before you make nikah? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. You need to consult with an attorney before your nikah date, before you go down to Home Affairs and get your marriage registered. You need to consult with an attorney and get your antenuptial contract drawn up.
Okay. Can I just pause you there? Just a thought popped into my head.
Yeah.
Are there mulanas or our Islamic clerics that can perform nikah and can register you? Is that a possibility?
Yes. And there's so many now because they realize that Muslim marriages are not recognized. Lots of mulanas have come on board and have registered as marriage officers.
Right.
And then they can register the nikah for you, legally speaking.
But that will be an antenuptial.
No.
It will be a community of property.
Automatically in community of property. But I've also seen that these mulanas then advise the couple that they should get an antenuptial contract registered because I believe, and I stand to be corrected here, but I believe that is the more Sharia compliant marriage system, is a marriage out of community or property.
Okay. And what's this accrual or without accrual? What's that about?
So first let me explain. I'm going to explain to you guys first of all, what's a marriage in community or property.
Right.
So most people would think that's a great thing. I mean, we have in community or property would mean that all of the assets belong to both the husband and the wife. So regardless of who owns the assets, regardless of who bought the asset, regardless of who paid for the asset, even regardless sometimes of who inherited the asset, that asset will form part of the joint estate.
Because it all falls into the pot.
It's one big pot. Imagine it like that, right? But the other side to that is that the liabilities also become part of the joint estate. And those liabilities, the spouses, the legal term is that they are jointly and severally liable, meaning that if one of the spouses in a marriage in community or property owes a particular person or entity money, that entity has the choice of whether they want to sue both the husband and wife, or the husband only and not the wife, or the wife only and not the husband.
Let me pause you there. So you're saying that if someone owes the man money, they can come after the wife.
Husband owes someone money,
so they can't come after the wife
if you're
solely.
Married, yes, if you're married in community of property. So let's give a practical example. So we have a couple, both are professionals, and the husband goes and incurs a whole bunch of personal loans. and then he gets retrenched, or he loses his job, or he leaves his job, as the case sometimes is, and then the wife is working. The bank or whoever you've taken the loan from can actually come after the wife and attach her salary.
My word.
When the marriage is in community or property. So it's quite a dangerous type of marriage system to enter into if you have not been fully made aware of your rights. Right. So that's a very brief description. Obviously, you would need to consult an attorney to know more. I mean, that's just one tiny little part of community or property. I could go on. I lecture this topic at university to LLB students. This is an entire semester.
Okay.
Yeah, so to explain to you how convoluted the subject is, it takes me an entire semester to explain to my students
what contracts.
Yes,
contracts,
marriage contracts in community, out of divorce and so on. So this is a very complex area of law in general, besides the Muslim marriage as part of it. So definitely we're not going to get through it all in the time that we have here. But in a nutshell, that's what marriages in community or property is. Now, moving on to marriages out of community or property with an accrual and without an accrual. So to simplify it, a marriage with an accrual is calculated like this. So at the onset, at the beginning of the marriage, the wife will declare what her net worth is, right? The husband will declare what his net worth is. And then the accrual is then calculated only on the growth of each spouse.
Okay. So
right?
within the marriage system, or while they're married?
While they're married, how are each of their estates grow? How are each of their estates going to grow?
So who has more barakah?
well, here's the thing. Let me explain to you why the system was created. And this is one of my favorite parts, even to lecture in. Even at university, when I studied, I loved studying this particular section because it just made so much sense to me. When we get married, and you know it, Nazia, you know it as well, whether we want to face it or not, or we want to say, no, women are equal and all of that jazz. At the end of the day, when a woman gets married, and you're a professional, and so am I, your career does take a backseat.
Definitely.
I mean,
in terms of child rearing and taking care of the home.
Correct. You are just automatically, it's assumed that your career will take a backseat and your husband will then be the breadwinner, or, the person bringing in the bulk of the money. And you is sort of given the option, if you want to work, go ahead. But provided you're going to work around the family, the home.
And still cover your responsibilities, definitely.
Yes. And so traditionally what was happening was that the women were contributing to the household, perhaps not financially, but in the form of services. So wives were cooking and they were cleaning and they were taking care of the children, picking them up from school. And in so doing, they were actually growing the husband's estate. A practical example, if the wife is going to be collecting the children from school every day, then that means dad doesn't need to pay for a driver. Right?
Oh, that's a good one.
If mom is going to say, okay, listen, for example, I'm a pharmacist, so I'm going to locum, but I'm only going to do so in the morning so that
I can pick up the kids.
So I can pick up the kids, and then we don't need aftercare from 12 till the afternoon or 2 till the afternoon. And then again, that financially is benefiting dad's estate because mom has taken a backseat in her career.
And by her covering her role, she's allowing him to do his work peacefully.
Right. And so it seemed like a better system to have it in place where at the end of that marriage, we consider the growth of each of their estates, and whoever's estate grew more would pay the other one out, so we equal at the end of that marriage. Right? So that's the marriages with an accrual. A marriage without an accrual is
what's yours is yours.
The opposite of in community property. It's basically a complete separation of estates. What's yours is yours, what's mine is mine. We will never those lines will never be crossed. The liabilities are yours, my liabilities are mine, my assets are mine, and your assets are yours. And that's never ever going to cross under any circumstances.
Right, okay. So it sounds pretty neat. Like just... Yeah.
It's probably the neatest, cleanest one you can think of.
And South African legislation does not provide legal recognition of the Muslim marriage, as we mentioned, in terms of nikah and subsequently talaq. And therefore, nikah and talaq does not function in the same way legally, as opposed to Islamically.
Yes.
So I'm assuming now what happens now, as you said, the wife takes a back seat, or she's doing, taking care of the child at home, and they, hopefully they don't divorce. But if they come to that point, does she get like spousal maintenance? Does she get what about him in terms of access? How does that work?
Okay,
because they're not legally recognized as married, right?
Yes, correct. Right. So I'm going to have to break this down into a few parts so that your listeners can better understand it. So when we say marriages are not legally recognized in our country or fully recognized, we're talking about legislation. So
Right.
you're essentially asking me, in terms of the Marriages Act, are Muslim marriages recognized? And the answer is no, because we do not fall within the definition of a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might say, okay, well, who cares? We married, right? I mean, essentially, nikah, whether you want to face the reality or say we're part of legislation or recognized or not, we are essentially married.
Right.
The complication of that comes into play when the couple, like you said, it does happen where couples then decide to divorce because it's not working out. Right. Now, in order for the Divorce Act to be for the requirements of the Divorce Act, one of the requirements of the Divorce Act is that your marriage needs to actually be recognized in terms of the Marriages Act. Now, the Divorce Act gives us lots and lots of consequences and solutions to what's going to happen to these marriages upon divorce. For example, one of the things we talk about is, correct, as you mentioned, spousal maintenance. The Divorce Act decides what's going to happen to the assets in this marriage. We even have something that's called forfeiture of assets or redistribution of assets. Now, all of those remedies are available in terms of the Divorce Act, but if our marriages are not even recognized in terms of the Marriages Act, then those recourses are not available to Muslim women. So can you see how unfair that is? So it's available to every other woman.
So basically, a woman will walk out with no rights.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
In terms of our legislation, yes. But I'm gonna get into a bit more detail regarding our current legal situation. So we have a Muslim Marriages Bill. Mm-hmm. Which has been a bill, since I was
2010, I heard?
Yes, it's been since I was in university, Nazia. So that's many, many years ago, and it gets me so worked up because I cannot understand how, we get all these other crazy laws that get passed daily, yet a bill that
takes that long.
Takes such a long time. Yeah. I lectured, imagine, I was at university, I learned about the bill, and then 10 years later, I was lecturing the same bill to my students.
And it's still a bill.
It's still a bill, right? So it's a little bit frustrating. So in other words, we know we're close to getting our stuff recognized in terms of legislation. However, our courts have beautifully come to our rescue. Right. So what has happened is normal, average Muslim women like me and you, or women who have experienced marital difficulties and want to get a divorce, or who are going through a divorce, have approached the courts and said, hi, in layman's terms, hi there, I understand that you have chosen not to recognize my marriage. However, I did actually have a marriage. I was actually married to this man. We lived as husband and wife. Right. I fulfilled all the duties of a wife, and he, in return, took care of me. He paid certain bills for me. You absolutely cannot say to me now at the end of this marriage that, sorry, it wasn't a marriage.
Right.
And the court.
So you'd have to go to court to fight that battle.
Yeah, you're going to have to do that.
You're going to have to do that.
But the success rate of that has been quite good, in that the courts have really come to our rescue. They have recognized things like Muslim women are entitled to spousal maintenance. Yeah. They have recognized that Muslim women are allowed to inherit from their husbands.
I think it's just so sad that going through a divorce is it can weaken any soul. It is so traumatic.
Yeah.
And then to have to tell someone in that state, you're going to have to go to court
to fight. Basically.
So I don't know about others, but when I think about court, it shakes you a bit because it's not a place you want to go to.
The one thing I say to my clients all the time is, whether or not your marriage is registered or not, unfortunately, unless you guys come to a settlement, there is going to be a fight. Okay. It's not going to be pleasant. Nobody wants. Family law is not. It's a very highly stressful, highly emotional area of law.
And I think we both have this in common. No one wants to come to a lawyer. No one wants to come to a psychologist.
It's not something
no one wants to go to a dentist either.
Hey,
so we're all in the same pot.
Let me go and see my lawyer today. No, it's not one of those fun professions.
But I think I'll have the word pause. You have to pause on that for a quick ad break. Welcome, Mindful Matters, with me, your host, Nazia Iram Osman, and I'm sitting here with the lovely Ayesha Karim. And Ayesha and I were just talking about, Muslim marriages and the wisdom of registering them. And this thought popped into my head. And, we talk about divorce, but what is it only relevant to people that are going through that? What about those that, are perfectly fine, they're perfectly happy, but then life happens? And, I always have this fear, what happens if your spouse passes away or something happens to them? What are the implications of not having the marriages registered. So should we all be going out there and just registering our marriages? What do you think? What's the advice?
Exactly. When I said last week, this was exactly what I spoke about. And I said, some of us, alhamdulillah, may never experience a divorce. And shukr, that's fantastic. But unfortunately, the reality of life is that either you or your spouse are going to go first. That's right. Yeah. It's a reality we have to face it. It's not a fun topic, but it's something that needs to be discussed. So if you're currently whether you're married in community of property, out of community of property, with an accrual, without an accrual, or you just have a nikah in place, this is a conversation that needs to happen within your home. Right. It's a mature conversation that needs to happen between a husband and wife, and you guys really need to move past egos and judgment to a space where what's going to happen in the event, and discuss it. I mean, a divorce is not something anybody wants to think about, but it is something that perhaps should be discussed. And
but death is inevitable.
Yes,
now. Divorce may or may not, but death is inevitable.
And more importantly, death. What's going to happen if something happens to you? Like I said, nobody's trying. We're not advocating that these things happen, but they do happen. And so one of the ways that we can secure ourselves, regardless of the marriage regime that you have, is to sit by and say, how are we going to protect our assets? Now, legally, there's so many ways that we can do that, and you don't necessarily need to be married in community of property or out of community of property to do this. One of the ways that's very popular in my practice is my clients really do enjoy registering a family trust. Okay. And usually I have a situation where it's the husband and wife that are trustees, and then we make children beneficiaries, and we even have Sharia compliant trusts.
So even if they're not registered, they may still open the trust together.
Yes, of course, absolutely. And I see, if I could say, at least 80 to 90% of my clients who have not registered their marriages choose to create a family trust, and then you transfer those assets to the family trust so that the assets are preserved and secured for the sake of our children. Isn't that what this is all about, really?
Right, definitely.
It really is about our kids. I mean, you're a mom, I'm a mom, and at the end of the day, if it was just us alone, would we care? No, I don't think so. When you start adding children in, that's when the worry comes in. That's when the issue of security comes in. That's when the issue of what's going to happen to us, especially if dad's the breadwinner. What's going to happen to me if you're a stay-at-home mom? That's a conversation that you need to be able to have. What's going to happen to me and the children? Do we have a will in place? Should we be considering, and besides the trust, in terms of securing the assets, there's obviously a lot of, upon death, there's estate duties that need to be paid, there's taxes, there's a lot of financial implications.
So, and then even a will should be in place, right?
Yes, and now we have all of these Sharia compliant wills, we have Sharia compliant trusts. So, within the legal system that we have, there are so many solutions that we have available to us. But the main thing is that we need to understand what our rights are. Number one, we need to understand where do we fit in? So you need to look at it and say, where does my marriage fit in? Do I need to necessarily register a marriage? If the answer is no, and for some people the answer is no,
they don't care to go through it.
I've spoken to so many people, and the answer for them has just been, I don't see the need for it. Okay.
But I mean, if a will is not in place, and if just say they don't have a trust, and in the busyness of life, sometimes the big things we just kind of forget about, and something happens to the spouse.
Okay, so again, because we're not registered because we're not recognized in terms of the Marriages Act, essentially that woman should not be recognized as his spouse, right? Okay. However, again, the courts have come to our rescue, and they have recognized it. And in terms of now maintenance, as well as in terms of inheritance, women can inherit. In fact, we have recent case law that has allowed even the second wife to inherit.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's been really
Do you have to go to court for that?
You would have to approach, any estate that's being wound up has to be wound up. It's not done in an office, it's done at the master's office. Okay. So, you need to follow the correct channels to be able to get your rights recognized. And you must know this would then mean that the estate is being wound up interstate, which means it's not just the wives that are going to inherit. It's going to be the children, and it's lots of dynamics. It's not the ideal way to go. Ideally, you want a will in place. And I also think from an Islamic perspective, it's each of our duties and responsibilities to ensure that our estates are well managed and taken care of, and that I mean, and we know it's not a secret, we're not living in a Sharia compliant country, so it's up to us to ensure that we have the correct measures in place, so that our states are dissolved according to Sharia.
Right. And we're talking about the bill before this,
yes,
and I'm not sure if it's related, but I was sitting last night and reading up, and I found this article on Times Live which said that in 2000 there was a court order for the government to pass laws recognizing Muslim marriages, and they said it should be done within a 2-year span, and the date that they gave was 31st August 2020.
Correct.
And they said Muslim marriages, when this happens and when this law comes to pass,
yes,
Muslim marriages could be dissolved in according with the Divorce Act.
Correct. Yes.
And that kind of frightened me, and I'm like, oh my word, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because, and I looked to see what Jamia to think about this.
Yeah.
That means, and tell me if I'm wrong, that
yes,
if the Divorce Act comes into place, it means a woman can go and do it legally.
Yeah. So this was a judgment that was actually passed last year at the Cape High Court. It was against the President of South Africa and various others. It was essentially brought, it was a group action. So it was basically brought by a group of women who are fighting the cause that Muslim marriages need to be recognized.
Right.
And the government needs to recognize them. And we can't have this grey area. We can't be in a grey area for all eternity.
Right.
And the judgment was actually very much in our favor.
Okay.
Yes. And yes, they have given the legislator until 2020.
Which means that this bill that we're talking about, that's going to come into act, or is there some...
Well, yes, they want to finalize that. And the judgment went further to say that if it's not finalized by that date, then Muslim women should have recourse in terms of the Divorce Act, meaning if the Divorce Act affords any other woman rights to recourse, those same rights should be afforded to Muslim women as well.
Okay.
But that matter has now gone on appeal. So what's going to happen going forward? I can't answer that. Whether the legislator by 2020 is going to recognize our marriages,
you're not holding your breath for
I'm
that
not
one.
hold my breath.
But I mean, it's a bit dubious in that now they're saying, okay, we're giving you your rights, but if you think about it, it's now not in accordance with the Sharia, because women are not supposed to be, or we're not allowed to go in and decide for the divorce.
Correct. Yeah.
And that has, I think it has, I see women who suffer with this, but I also see sometimes the wisdom of this, because I think sometimes women can be a bit impulsive and very emotional. So I think it's two-sided,
I think also because of that, perhaps that's the reason why this bill has taken so long to come into play, because it would then give Muslim women quite a bit of rights.
Right.
And then that then comes in with the issue of Sharia. Is that Sharia compliant?
Yeah.
Obviously, we do have rights to divorce, but under certain very strict and very certain circumstances.
Right. That the Jamiyat handles.
Yes.
So then maybe they should keep Jamiyat as...
well, maybe, but then our courts would need to be like we study customary marriages at a university level. That's African marriages.
And they recognized.
And we taught that. We have to learn. It's part of our syllabus. So, you got to learn that.
What about, what about Hindu marriages? Because they also have customary.
No, they fall under, they're in the same grey area as
we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only the African customary marriages that are recognized.
They are recognized. Yeah.
Okay.
So they can have their traditional ceremony. They do not need to go off and register.
Okay, that's interesting. But I guess it's a minority thing. Certain fights we will have to...
No, we got to keep... That's the point. If a Muslim women keep bringing this issue up and we keep fighting the good fight, eventually these rights, how women in general, not just Muslim women, how are women in general given rights? We just came out of Women's Month.
Right.
How did this come about? It came about with average women standing up and saying, hi, I have rights too.
Right.
I deserve to have my rights protected by this government, and it will be. You need to protect me.
Okay, no, I'm thinking just because I don't want to be biased, but I think maybe I am. Just say, let's look at it from a man's perspective, right?
Let's do that.
Just say, Islamically, we married and we didn't do this legally, and now you saying I'm not going to give you access to the kids because go fight the battle. What about that?
Okay, that's awesome. Let's talk about that for a second. So there is a massive, massive, massive misconception here. The Children's Act is what governs access to minor children and child maintenance. Okay. So I've recently been elected on the Board of Directors for Child Maintenance Difficulties South Africa, and we deal that it's a non-profit organization, and that organization only deals with child maintenance. Now, child maintenance is the right of the child. The child has a right to be maintained by both parents.
Right.
The child also has a right to have a relationship with both parents, right? Whether or not those parents are married legally, in community, out community, accrual, it doesn't really make a difference.
Right.
That is the child's right regardless. If a child has two parents, even if they were never married, those rights exist. So the marriage itself and your access to the child and so on is not really going to be affected whether or not you were married.
Okay.
Insofar as...
So the father also has full rights.
Absolutely. The father would have full rights to access to that child. And obviously in terms of the Maintenance Act, in terms of maintenance, both mom and dad are equally responsible. But then again, on the flip side of our argument about women inheriting from their husbands, on the flip side of that argument, maintenance, as we know, according to Sharia, is the responsibility of the father and not the mother. So there's a lot of dynamics to take into consideration before we just pass judgment and start saying what's fair and what's not fair. It's very nice to argue one side of it and say, oh, well, women shouldn't be, marriages shouldn't be recognized in community of property because Sharia doesn't allow us to have that kind of marriage system. In the then upon divorce or death, the husband needs to allocate sufficient funds to take care of his children 100%. Mom's income or whatever she does, her estate, should not be taken into consideration. Yet in South African law, it is.
It's the other way.
Yeah, it is taken into consideration. So we need to find balance here and find what works for us, which is why I say these are just ways in which I like my clients and our community at large to know their rights. From there, you need to sit down with, first of all, start off by sitting down as a family, right? And then from there, sit down with an attorney and see how do we better secure ourselves? How are we going to structure this family? And I know money seems to be a very touchy subject.
And I'm thinking, like, you said,
difficult thing to talk.
Yeah, before marriage.
It's such a difficult thing to approach.
Yeah.
Now, and even after marriage, to sit down with your husband and say, yeah, check it, babe.
Let's talk about this.
Let's talk about you dying for a second.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen if that's not an easy conversation
to have
with anyone.
But I keep on thinking, okay, after marriage it's between the two of you. Before marriage, can you imagine a woman coming up and saying, so let's talk about this. What am I going to get?
Then we're going to get the in-laws involved.
that's scary stuff. Yeah. I would be scared. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So it's, it brings me to the next question. And I know you were saying, what made you bring this up?
Yes.
And I think it's so important because the topic is, or the question's about premarital contracts, because I don't know how things are now, but I remember back in the day, which is my day many years ago, when a new bride comes in, or a person that you're considering or you proposed, you're very meek in front of your in-laws. You're very aware of their opinions, and for you to have this conversation, what happens if this happens, or how much meher am I getting?
Yeah,
negotiations. It's very uncomfortable.
It is.
But do you see clients that come to you saying, I want to set up a premarital contract?
Well, if a client came to me to set up a premarital contract, I would be obliged to tell them that's fine and, we can do that for you.
Right.
However, please understand that the legal consequences flowing from there are really we're in an unstable environment regarding Muslim marriages. So how do I then enforce that agreement for you?
Okay.
Some of those premarital contracts I've seen give the woman the power of divorce under certain circumstances.
So is that legally drafted?
It would be legally drafted, but how do I enforce that in court if our marriages aren't even recognized? How do I go to a court and say, please divorce me because I have a contract that says I'm divorced?
Yeah,
it's so contradictory.
Right.
So I wouldn't be able to. You're welcome to draft the contract, and mind you, Nazia, having said that, because I deal so extensively with our community and with Muslim people primarily, I have so many clients who have come to me and they draw an agreement between husband and wife. Sometimes it's even between ex-husband and wife, and that document doesn't ever see a courtroom. It's an agreement between two parties and many
understanding.
And I have many like that, and it works perfectly, and it really does have good results. But that's obviously not going to be everybody's case. But it does still work. I mean, you can put a contract in place, and inshallah, if everybody's going to be honest and keep to their word, you're not going to have a problem. And I do have lots of clients like that, where we enter into contracts and I haven't yet seen a problem with their contract, and everybody seems to keep their word. And those contracts have never needed to go to court to be enforced.
So they value their word. They keep up to their promise.
And the nice thing about putting it in writing is it sort of sets the tone and it sets the pace. We're all putting our intentions clearly, and if we're all, we all strive to be good Muslims, and if I've given you my word as a Muslim, then we expect to follow through. And like I said, I have a lot of good cases and positive cases where these things have not had any problems.
Right. And it's so interesting, but once again we have to pause for a quick ad break. So we'll see you soon. Welcome back to Mindful Matters, where we're sitting with attorney Ayesha Karim. And today we're speaking about Muslim marriages and the fact that it's not legally recognized and what are the repercussions of that. And we've discussed the contracts, we've discussed nikah, talaq, what happens when you don't have a will in place. We've touched a little bit on premarital contracts. And I think we spoke about quite a bit.
Yes, we covered quite a bit in this short space of time.
And I'm just wondering, do you think there's any other important aspect that we left out that people should know about?
I think there's one thing I'd like to perhaps tell your listeners, is that so in the legal field, we have what we call opposed divorces and we have unopposed divorces.
Right.
So an unopposed divorce is when two parties have mutually agreed that, one, they no longer want to be married to each other, and two, they've decided already. So before you come and see the attorney, you guys have decided what's going to happen to your assets. Now, this is an ordinary registered marriage I'm referring to. So you decided what's going to happen to the assets. If it's, you're going to divide them half-half, or you're going to give the wife the house, whatever. You've also decided what's going to happen with the kids. So where do the kids live? What amount of maintenance is going to be paid? And how often or what kind of access does dad get to those children? Those are called unopposed divorces, right? Where it's very amicable.
Right.
And we get those types of divorces not just in civil marriages, in life. You have people who part ways and there is no ill feelings.
I think that's the best, when you have an understanding and you're doing it out of court.
And you don't need to sometimes tell dad what his financial obligations are towards his children. He knows, and I can't give you the number. There's so many really good dads out there who don't need to be told. They don't need a court order to tell them to pay for their children. And I have, on the flip side of that, I have really good moms who don't need a court order to tell them, hi, dad needs to see the kids. Or phone dad if, there's an issue at school, or send dad a copy of the report, or tell dad there's a parents meeting. You get women who are just happy to do that and happy to work together. Now, on the flip side of that, we have our opposed divorces. Now, for Muslim women, this is the part that I want to really give our community some encouragement, is when there's an opposed divorce, even if you are registered, regardless of the religion that you follow, an opposed divorce is messy. It is hard. It's traumatic, it's emotional. So just because you're a Muslim woman, don't feel like, oh, my rights are not recognized and I don't want to fight this, and why should I fight this? There are Christian women and Hindu women, African women who have to go out there and fight for their rights in court, even though they have a registered marriage, because the husband is saying, sorry, we're married in community of property, but I don't feel like giving you half the estate, or no, I'm not going to give you any.
It's a universal challenge.
It's a universal challenge all the time. It's a universal thing. So don't feel that we're being, yes, to a certain degree, our rights are
overlooked.
Yes, our government can do much better for us. But on a positive note, if we stand up and we start standing up for our rights, then we create a precedent for women going forward. And then we stop leaving that power in government's hands and we start taking that power on for ourselves and for the next generation, for our daughters, that are to come. If we start setting precedents in courts, well then, if anything, Allah forbid, should happen to one of our children, well, they're going to go to court and they're going to have a really nice precedent there for them. And that would have to be followed.
And I think the first step is to bring awareness to it. So we're playing our part.
Yes. And inshallah.
But thank you so much for coming. I always feel guilty calling guests out on a Sunday. And I think, Ayesha, I'm so comfortable with you. Whenever you come, I'm like, okay, I'm relaxed now. It's Ayesha.
Yes.
So I'm leaving this invitation, inshallah. May we see you soon to speak more about these topics. And next week, we have another interesting topic, and that is human trafficking in South Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. So to round up today's show, I feel it's right to conclude with the following verses from the Quran, which speaks about marriage in the following terms. Amongst his proofs is that he has created for you spouses from amongst yourselves in order to have tranquility and contentment with each other. And he placed in your hearts love and care towards your spouses. In this, there are sufficient proofs for people who think. And to end, since according to someone this show is for women, I have to say this. It's a hadith of our Prophet ﷺ who said, "The most perfect believer in faith is the one whose character is finest and who is the kindest to his wife." Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Nazia.
Assalamu alaikum, and I hope this show lived up to its promise to inspire, educate, and motivate. And I think we should also give you a few laughs. And remember, be mindful, be kind, and enjoy the rest of your week.